Hello, welcome to How to Succeed During a Pandemic. Hi, I'm your host, Wendy Lally, and I'm delighted to welcome you back this week. Or if you're new to this program, welcome. The show is it's really a show about resiliency, because all of us have to practice that during this time of our life. I call it the era of COVID-19. And what we do is we interview people who are not only managing to survive during this time, but actually thrive. We originally started out as business interviews, but lately we've been doing artists and writers, and today we have two people that are in the literary world. One is a publisher, and one is an incredible HR expert who is also a writer, a novelist, a blogger, and highly successful at all of those things. My profession is I'm a copywriter and a marketer. So it's kind of natural for me to interview people and ask what they do and share that with other people as a way of promoting their businesses. And that's kind of how I started this program. But today, as I said, we've expanded our range here and really to talk about life during this time that's challenging and yet in many ways, if you meet the challenge, can be very, very interesting and give us, I think, sometimes more than it takes away. Today, we're going to be talking to two people that are not only involved in the literary world, but also in the business world. And Lynn has got kind of one foot in both because she's has written a novel, more than one actually, one ready to go, and also 5 business books. So I'm very excited about hearing about those. And one of the person who's helping her with these books is EricMiller. He is a literary agent, and he has a company called 3i Books. So I'm going to introduce Eric to you now, and he will tell you about his business, and then I'm going to introduce you to Lynne Curry, who is an extraordinary person with an incredible career. She had her own company, her own HR management company, and then she got into writing. She's a writer an author of 5 different books on business and handling people, dealing with difficult people, including bullies. In fact, Lynn has written the book on how to handle bullies. So I'm sure you all want to read that because we all experienced that ourselves. And recently, she's a blogger. She has 2,203 subscribers right now, which is extraordinary, really. And she's also a newspaper columnist, and she's published in 5 states. So I'm going to let her talk, but first we're going to meet Eric. Eric, why don't you tell us about yourself, how you began in being a literary agent, and your background in publishing as well?
Thanks. Thank you, Wendy, for that great introduction. I appreciate it. My company is called 3i Books, and I'm a literary agent. That's how I met Lynn. She wrote this incredible novel called Lovecom, which is a women's fiction. I read the book and I loved it, and that's how we ended up getting acquainted and becoming agent and author. I have 35 years in the publishing world. My parents had a company called Academy Chicago Publishers. It was one of the most enduring small presses. And I moved to Reno, Nevada, and started my literary agency. It's my calling. I like to help people, write books, express themselves. So that's me. I'm Eric Miller with 3i Books.
Thank you. And Lynn, I'm going to ask, I have in my notes, it says 5 minutes, but I'm sure Lynn can go on for at least a half an hour, if not a full hour, all by herself, because there's so much to talk about. But please tell us about how you got started and maybe a little bit about your background with the HR company as well as your writing career.
And welcome and to everybody who's watching, and greetings from very snowy Anchorage, Alaska, where there's so much snow in my driveway that I really am grateful to be on this podcast right now. There are 3 Lynne Currys, really. back in the 70s, I started an HR company. I started it in Nome, Alaska, and wound up with 4,300 clients from 14 states and 3 companies. I migrated to Anchorage, Alaska, and did a whole range of things, mostly training and coaching. And then there is the newspaper columnist. I began writing a weekly column for the Anchorage Daily News, which is a Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper. And there were so many readers who wrote in questions that I recreated the column as a Dear Abby of the workplace. And every week get about 20 or 30 questions from, I hate my boss, or my coworkers are driving me up the wall, or what do I do if I just got fired? And so that column appears for 39 years now, weekly in one paper, and for different periods of time, it's run in other papers. And then my big love is to write fiction. I've published a few short stories and poems. I met Eric after I finished a debut novel and thought, I want to find an agent and a publisher. And I'm working on my second novel. So those are the Lynne Currys. And then Wendy told me to talk about my blog, which I started in 2014 after publishing a few books that were compilations of the best newspaper articles. And then amazingly, 2203 subscribers from 96 countries. And I get a host of questions to address on that blog.
It's probably 2205 at least by the time we're finished this. I wanted to ask you too, I know that Eric found you on LinkedIn, and I wanted to ask you guys to talk about that because it's a wonderful platform. I don't think people realize how useful and valuable LinkedIn is to businesses. And it's, you sometimes tend to think of it as an extension of Facebook. It's not. It's a whole other animal altogether. And Eric, why don't you tell us how you found Lynn?
With LinkedIn, it's the platform that I use to really build my business, and a lot of the valuable partnerships that I have come from LinkedIn. So what I did was on LinkedIn you can do a geographical search, and through the geographical search it's almost like throwing a rock in a pond. It just starts, the waves start going on. So I did New York because I'm in the publishing world, Chicago because I'm from there, and it's kind of an underrated publishing capital, and LA, and then I added Reno, Nevada, where I live. And I met Lynn. We met each other, and I always want, whenever I meet somebody that seems interesting or is a writer, I always ask for a phone call. That's the ask. You ask for a phone call, you ask for a follow-up, a coffee meeting, whatever you want to call it. And we ended up getting on the phone and hitting it off. And she sent me her novel. I was riveted, Love.com. I was riveted by it. I thought it was great. And, then all of a sudden she said, hey, I've got these other books, so we were able to place 3 different books. And we have a 4th one coming up on coaching, self-coaching. And so we've got that plus the other novel. So Lynn, I would say, is one of my favorite clients, and I met her on LinkedIn.
Let that be a lesson to us all. And while we're talking about the book, why don't you give us the title? It's about management. I know that.
The newest book that is now finished and 42,000 words is called Managing for Accountability. The idea is that every business owner and every manager wants employees who are all in, who are 100% invested. And over the years, I've believed that accountability is a decision and a choice, and it's a way of living fully. And as the pandemic began, I realized that accountability could be one of those mantras that steers us through to thriving again. There's integrity, there is trust, and there's accountability. And if you can count on your teammates, your manager, your employees to be 100% accountable, you can make it.
And I like that column you did, the blog you did on talking about getting employees to be happy even when they're away from the office, and that building a team. I think that's really important because this is probably going to continue in some form or other for us all.
I just did a fun column on virtual team building, and 4 different companies asked me for solutions to getting their remote employees excited again about the company. And for one of them, I designed a murder mystery where managers would shoot each other and be interviewed as potential suspects. And for another, I created something called the Manager Gauntlet, where managers could speak about their vision and then employees could shoot questions at them, on the spot questions that managers would have to answer live and with no preparation.
That was a great piece. I have to confess, I am now become a Lynne Curry junkie.
Woohoo!
Let's talk a little bit about your book, Beating the Workplace Bully. Did you, is that something that came out of your work as a columnist, or your observations, or both? I mean, your observations while you had your business, or both?
Actually, I backed into it because I was bullied all my life and I was a target. And it was as if I had a spot on my forehead that said, go for it. You know, she's a wuss. And a coworker and I agreed we would do a seminar on how to deal with bullies. I was going to do the training and make it exciting, and she was going to teach the bully part. And then she left the state. And I had 48 people ready to come. So I looked on the internet to see what was there. I couldn't find very much, but I taught a 4-hour seminar on how to deal with bullies, and it went over incredibly well. I suddenly had client after client who wanted that seminar, individuals who wanted to come and learn how not to be targets anymore. And I discovered there were no books of the kind I wanted, which is I want to be able to pick up a book and read it through and learn the skills to deal with bullies, not just deal with them, but to outsmart them. Mm-hmm. And that was my original name. It was Outsmarting the Workplace Bullies. It got renamed Beating the Workplace Bullies. And it's also been republished in Hong Kong. There's a Mandarin Chinese edition of it. And I get questions from all over the world about, hey, there's this bully. I answer some of them on the blog, and for others of them, I just answer them privately.
Right. Eric, I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with authors? I mean, you found Lynn through LinkedIn, you connected on the phone, you're, good buddies, and there's a simpatico thing going. But do you, let's say you met someone else that maybe you're interested in the book, but not necessarily in the author. Do you send them to a contractor? How does that work? I mean, do you have to feel something for the author before you kind of take them on?
Yeah, I try to be as transparent as I can because I do work remotely from Reno, Nevada. So it's not one of these things. There's the old idea of like an agent that lives in New York City. You can go to Elaine's restaurant and could do the deal in 20 minutes. And that's not really about me. It's about relationships. So that's why I always want to talk to the people before, even if I read the book. I've got this science fiction book that just came in from this doctor who lives in Northern California, and it's really very much of a new age. There's a section in California called Mount Shasta, which is kind of a spiritual center. And this book is really difficult. But what I'm going to do is I finished reading it. I was really intrigued by it, and I want to talk to him about it because I want to see what his vision is. So it's really putting the author's vision together. So I work on book proposals. I work on pitches. I kind of pride myself on being sort of a pitch artist. I like to try to sit there, and just work on that and try to make it as best I can. But I'm always transparent with the author and say, listen, we're trying this. I'm humble, I'm happy that we're working together, but it might be a long haul, and you got to have what they call intestinal fortitude. You got to be able to just suck up the rejection, and you never know. You just never know. So I've been building the business. It's been going really, really well. I'm blessed. I can work for myself now. For a while there, I used to go out and do other jobs, but now I just do this. And so that's the way I deal with the authors. I think of myself as an author-centric literary agency, where the author comes first.
Well, I'm sure many people would be very intrigued by that, because that's usually doesn't work that way from what I've been told. Yeah.
Right.
Do you function as sort of an editor as well as an agent? So you're really kind of
It's true. Like
and
when we were doing managing for accountability, Lynn sent me the manuscript and she said, "I want you to edit it," and I was like, "Oh, you don't have to." She's like, "No. I want you to edit it." I was like, "Okay," I was like, "Okay." So I do help people with editing. I have a book writing workshop for beginners. I mean, Lynn's not a beginner, but there's some people that want to do a book. I talked to a lady today that had a leadership novel, like a fable, and I told her about it. And she's just like, "Oh, sign me up. This is great." It's a 6-week class. So I try to act as a coach. I think being an editor, being an agent is a little bit more than just, there's a little bit of hand holding that goes into it. And book marketing for me is like not work. Book marketing is kind of a niche kind of thing. I've been doing it for so long. It doesn't seem to work. So those are the kinds of things I do. When I look at it, deep down, I'm a marketing person like you, Wendy. You mentioned you're a marketer. Yeah. I market Lynn's book to publishers. You see, that's the way I look at it. So, editing, marketing, all kind of.
No, I know what you mean, but even as the thing that people sometimes don't understand about marketing is, like when I'm working with a client, I really regard it as a collaboration, because they know their business better than I know their business. On the other hand, sometimes they know it too well because they can't step away from it and see what the customer is looking at. Yes. So I represent the customer and say, well, I'm not interested in that, but I am interested in this. Let's talk about that. When you work with Lynn, did you? Because I know she had books published before she met you, and Lynn, did working with Eric suggest books to you, or was it, did you have hidden things you hadn't shown to anyone and pulled them out to show them to Eric, or how did that happen?
I gave Eric Lovecom, and then as he and I talked, and he continued to meet people on LinkedIn, he connected me with a publisher called Business Experts Press, and we together talked to that group. I worked with one of their adjuncts, and we came up with 3 different titles that they wanted: managing for accountability, and then navigating conflict, and then reality-based management. They actually had a couple more ideas, but I said, whoa, 3 is good. So Eric sold all 3, and we are off to the races. The first one is out. And if somebody writes me on LinkedIn or Twitter and says, I listened to Wendy today, and I'm interested in your book, I'll give them a 25% off coupon. It comes out in August. The other 3 are 2 are by traditional publishers, and 1 is collections of the best columns. And so those were already set.
Has COVID made any difference in your business? Has it increased it? Has it slowed down? Has it affected it in any way? I'm just thinking that because the libraries are closed and people are in and more likely to read because they are in, that it should, increase business for publishers.
It does. 2020 was one of my best years. I mean, it actually got me to a point where now I can work on this full time. When the beginning of 2020, I wasn't there. So the COVID-19 really helped me because people were sitting at home thinking about writing books, rethinking about what it was, refocusing and kind of going back to a different time. And it kind of slowed people down. So for my business, being a coach, being a service-oriented business for books, it's been a real boon. I'm lucky that way. It's been great.
You mentioned the science fiction book. Do you have a particular genre that you like to concentrate on? I know obviously
Yeah.
you do business books, and you've got Lynn's novel in the mix there, but westerns or 'cause
Oh no, more like thriller, crime, romance, and sort of historical, fiction, any kind of genre fiction, and I liked. Okay, now all of a sudden I'm blanking out. Let's see. Um, yeah, genre fiction, generally speaking, probably with a preference toward mystery, thriller, crime is what I like to do. Science fiction is this science fiction book. I have to admit, I'm into fantasy. I know a lot about fantasy. I've read all kinds of fantasy, and fantasy is different from science fiction. This book is really different, and I think that's a strength. I haven't talked to the author, so I was just mentioning that I do, but science fiction. I think some people have to get really into science fiction. They're really that's a deep dive. Not so much. I'm more like old school, kind of like the Frederick Pohl and the Isaac Asimov and the Arthur C. Clarke. That's my era of science fiction. So it's a risk, but any kind of business is a risk, right? So I'll reach out to the guy. He's a doctor. He lives in the Mount Shasta area, and we'll see what we can do with it.
well, let's talk about Lynn's book now.
Yeah.
Love.com. So tell us about that. Who wants to describe the plot and the characters? And Lynn, do you want to take that?
Oh, he's pointing at me, so I'll go for it. Some years ago, my fiance died just before we got married. And that became the inspiration kernel of the book. And then so many of my women friends are incredibly skilled at work, but their personal lives are a mess. And so I borrowed some of that for the main character. I also took HR skills. And so by day, she's this terrific HR person who handles workplace bullying and sexual harassment and domestic violence. And at night, she makes a decision, egged on by her best friend, to get on Love.com and look for someone to be a special man. But she doesn't really look because the men just don't measure up to this wonderful fiance she lost. So she has a couple prospects and she decides that they're not exciting enough. And then a guy comes across who is incredibly exciting, a hot financial planner. And he dazzles her and he takes her on flying trips. And the only trouble is her dog doesn't like him. And she starts to notice things that don't quite measure up. And after a while, enough clues surface that she makes a decision, I'm not so sure. Now, I'm not going to spoil what all happens, but I'm going to say she takes him out.
It sounds wonderful. I can't wait to read it. I mean, really. If the book goes, do you see yourself, that's the direction you're going to go in?
Wendy, that is absolutely the direction I want to go in. I want to write a lot of fiction. I have also fallen in love with the blog readers, with the people who comment on the blog. Some of them comment almost every article, and I love their comments. A lot of them don't get posted because they're a little bit shy, but they write personally, and it's really fun to read.
Well, because I noticed that your blogs are like your columns. I mean, sometimes it seems you take the column and you put it in the blog too, right?
One a week is always from the newspaper column. And the other 4 or 5 or the other 3 or 4 are just questions that came in that would never be right for the newspaper.
Yeah, because I wouldn't say it's racy, but it's certainly, juicy? I mean, I'm not sure the right word.
Some of them are pretty racy or juicy. And for years, the newspaper used to say, did this really happen? just about the same time, about 12 different people would call and say, was that our company? So
Interesting.
I've been really careful not to post anything that is too immediate, that people would be able to put enough pieces together. And I always smush one or two details. So for the one I most recently posted, I altered the age of one of the people and that sort of thing.
When you were writing the column, could people respond? Because is that the difference in the
Yes,
column and the blog?
in the newspaper, one day I got 600 people commenting about a column I wrote. And I understand from the Anchorage Daily News that my column was often in the top 10 of the most read. When it was in the Tri-City Herald, they said they designed their entire business page around it on the day it appeared, because it is those kind of talk about it around the water cooler,
Right.
kind of semi-gossipy.
But also, those are problems you don't know who to take the problem to.
Yes.
I mean, it's because I had a whole career with those kind of problems. You can't.
That
get
is
HR.
true.
And even when I went to HR basically said, this is too hot for us. We're not touching it. So, if you don't like it, leave. I mean, that was, that was how I left a job I had for 7 years. Folks, you may have noticed that this picture is a little different. We've been having some technical difficulties, but I think we're fine now, because Eric sort of disappeared on us for a little while, but he's back. And Eric, I wanted to ask you, what would you advise an author to do to find an agent, or even better, to find, well, not necessarily better if the agent is you, but how to find a publisher?
So what I think you have to do is really look at a good synopsis. A synopsis is going to draw people in. I think you need to kind of put together the best chapters, the best excerpts that you can find, and you just have to do the old-fashioned following up stuff. You just have to find the people. It's going to if do your research and make sure that's the book, the kind of book you're looking for. Because every time I get a rejection from an editor, they say this doesn't work for me, I always follow up with them and ask them, what are you currently looking for? And then I put it into an Excel sheet and I just keep going. But what I was saying for authors, for one author with a book or a series of books, the best thing is to do be professional about it. Make sure that your stuff is double spaced. It's 12-point type. It's Times New Roman or Arial, something really accessible. And don't send too much stuff. Send a synopsis of maybe 300 to 500 words, and a chapter or two, and an author bio about why you are qualified to write the book. So that's what you have to do.
We've come to the end of our show. It's 12:30 and we have to skedaddle. But I want to thank all of you for stopping by. And of course, I want to thank our guest, Lynne Curry. Thank you so very, very much. And Eric Miller, I'm very grateful that we could talk to you about publishing and the world of literature. And before I say goodbye, I just want to remind you that I'm on 216thenet.com every Monday at noon, and also that this show will be on Facebook. The page is Succeed in a Pandemic, and I hope you'll see it so you can see these folks in person and see their wonderful faces and learn a little bit more about them, because we'll have the contact information for them at the end of the program. So thank you again. Please, as I always say, stay in just a little while longer and stay well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.